I'm Ted Leverette, the original business buyer advocate. For more than 30 years, I've been training and guiding people worldwide who buy small and mid-sized businesses. I am not a broker, never have been. I don't sell businesses. I don't represent sellers. I was watching a group of searchers online complaining about brokers. And here's what I typed in. I see the messes from unprepared searchers. Most of the time, searchers are the problem with the best brokers. And even the worst brokers are more friendly with well-prepared searchers. And what we're going to cover today is how searchers can be more credible, but not only credible, but desirable. Here's something else we're going to do today. We're going to try to protect the downsides. We're going to try to maximize the upsides. Let's talk about a downside. You might have heard this, shouldn't have done it. And then you hear this from sellers and brokers, you hear it from investors, landlords, and of course the buyers about the transactions that should not have occurred. And these bad deals, they're especially likely for what? Poorly prepared or poorly advised searchers. And it comes down to the people without industry specific experience. And that's why I'm going to share some ideas that you can use to assess yourself. And if you're a broker or a landlord, you can use these questions we're going to cover later to evaluate searchers. And you want to do it up front. Get rid of the people who are just not going to be qualified. And it's the buyers who don't have or they don't appear to have sufficient experience or knowledge in the industries in which they're searching. And if they don't show, if these searchers don't show well right up front, guess what? They get rejected. Game over. And that's why so many people just can't find what? Deals. Because once you know the questions, you can derive the answers. And it's better to derive them what? Before you're asked the questions. If you're a searcher. Hey, don't misinterpret what I'm trying to say either. It is not necessary for sellers to reject buyers who don't have industry experience. The fact of the matter is, most people setting out to buy a business outside their experience. Just ask business brokers. You show up asking about one kind of business, you leave buying another kind. And most of the time, for most searchers, it's outside their resume. So what differentiates the successful buyers from the buyers who wreck the acquisitions? Well, it's how well they prepared to buy and prepared to operate the businesses. And they do that before they begin searching. And I see it every day. I posted something online, I think it was yesterday, on a forum. 42 of the last 50 searchers who sent me an email saying, hey, I'm Joe Blow. I'm looking for this kind of business. Here's my criteria. Would you send me a lead to a seller or someone who could refer a seller? 42 out of 50 made the biggest mistake they possibly could. They showed zero evidence of their ability to successfully operate a business in the niches that they listed in their search letter. I mean, who does that? Well, 42 out of 50. Not good. And these are the same people that brokers are dumping, sellers won't talk to. And then, of course, we complain about the mean brokers. You know, it's not just brokers and it's not just sellers. Remember, there are lenders, there are investors and landlords, even guys like me, people like me, advisors. We're concerned about people who are trying to migrate into something new, because it can be a losing proposition unless they're well prepared. And one of the first things we do, at least I do with my clients, is we do industry research. And I did it this morning just for practice. I said, I'm in Chicago and I want to buy an HVAC business, and I need to know what's happening in the industry in the Chicagoland. What kind of questions should I be asking sellers? Where should I be worried? What kind of questions should I expect them to ask me if I'm a potential buyer? I did all that. I did it online. I did it using AI. And in less than 5 minutes, I had a work plan. And by the way, I read it, and most of it was good. I mean, some was nonsense, so I threw that away. So I guess the reason I'm camped out on that right now is If 42 out of 50 searchers didn't have enough sense to do what I just did so that their search letter or their email could have expressed something that's related, that's a hot topic right now in an industry, why would we take them, what, seriously? And this is why buyer competition, your biggest threat, if you're a buyer or a searcher, is why buyer competition knocks most searchers off the horse. One of the questions I was asked is, why do sellers and brokers reject searchers? Well, I'm going to give you a few. Stay with me. It's worth it for what I'm going to say later. But for those of you, if you're a first-time buyer and you're not being eagerly welcomed by brokers and owners, here's probably why. They don't show sufficient money up front. Up front, I mean that very first conversation, not in your search letter, not in an email, but the first time some human being contacts you and says, so who in the hell are you and why should I pay attention to you? Show the money. You don't have to show all your money. At least show enough money that what? Covers what they expect you to have for a down payment and deal making costs. If you don't do that, why should anyone talk to you? Because see, the savvy searchers are doing that. Unrealistic expectations. This comes down to the acquisition criteria. It comes down to these rules of thumb that so many misled searchers are using to do quick valuations of companies. Also, with respect to unrealistic expectations, it's how they handle and sequence their interactions with brokers and sellers. There's a right way to handle stuff in a right sequence. And if you get, the cart before the horse, you lose people. The other the other reason we're rejected, searchers. Remember, my audience are searchers. I know I have others, brokers and others on board because they want to know how to evaluate us. That's okay. That's why I'm doing this. One of the big reasons for rejection is searchers do not plausibly answer industry-specific questions. Plausibly, not possibly, plausibly. Look it up if you don't know what that word means. One of the most important tasks I cover with my client is we do the research, and I kind of hinted at that a moment ago, to know what the questions are going to be. And then we craft the answers and we practice them. Now, here's some tips. Searchers, you need to assess yourself tomorrow, today. Again, I know most of you think you know what you're doing. Well, you would have bought a business already, unless this is your first week, if you really knew what you were doing. So this is the chance to go over the kinds of stuff you need to be looking at, because it's what the brokers and the sellers and landlords, I keep saying landlords, remember landlords, you don't get a deal done. You can spend all that money in due diligence. You can have a contract, and landlords at escrow are known not to approve the deal. Oops, game over. So one of the things we're carefully looking at are landlords. What are they going to need to know? And if you say, gee, I grew up in the manufacturing sector and I want to buy an HVAC service business, the landlord's going to worry about, is the rent going to be paid? Oh, yeah. Um, it may be okay for business buyers to acquire companies based on their potential, but it's not a good idea for owners to sell their business to a potentially successful buyer. So you see the undercurrent here. Everyone's wondering, are these searchers and buyers going to be able not only to do the deal, but then keep the company in business and sustain its profitability? Oh, hey, don't get too excited about bankable deals. Remember, they're in the business, banks, of making loans, and they're going to get paid no matter what. So don't think they're looking out for you too much. Why? Because most buyers, particularly first-time buyers in the small and mid-sized business market, you're gonna provide a personal guarantee. So if the business gets wrecked and you claim no more money, well, they're just going to take the rest of what you own. Sellers, don't let buyers experiment with your company. You're not going to recoup that seller financing, or buyer financing, I guess we could call it. Why? Because if the buyer can't operate the business, you're the first one not to get paid. So the due diligence part, keep in mind that the buyers and the sellers, they're vetting one another. So you're each trying to figure out what's in it for me. I know that sounds so obvious. Yeah, I'm seeing stuff posted online. I get emails from people. Even my own clients will sometimes ask me, why are they putting me through the ringer? Geez, I have the money. I'm a ready, willing, and able buyer. Yeah, well, you might be. But if your presentation isn't plausible, if it isn't believable enough, in the context of buyer competition, it is endless, endless. Brokers are not making this up. When they say there are 10 or 15 buyers out there are. Most of them are not qualified, but guess what? They're all bidding against one another. So you have to show well. And the only reason I'm doing this today is to help you searchers show better and show truthfully. One of the other questions was, well, Ted, what about industry specific questions? Can we handle them today? Nope. All right, because you can see all the people signed in, uh, and people who registered not signed in, who hope to hear back from me after this. Those those kind of questions we can't handle in this event because those questions differ for every kind of business, and they also differ for every kind of buyer. In other words, what you're bringing to the table. Even though you're going to see the questions, it's not enough to know the questions. You need to know the answers. And you need to know the right answers, and you need to be able to present them in the right way. Today we're going to look at the questions and we'll talk a little bit about how you answer this stuff. It is a huge mistake if you're a searcher, if you're talking to brokers and sellers and maybe lenders. Well, absolutely, not maybe, for sure, lenders. You're talking to lenders and you don't already know the kind of concerns they have about all searchers and particularly you, and you haven't formulated or at least anticipated the questions you're going to see in about 5 or 10 minutes, and then practice. That means rehearse the answers so they're plausible, believable. Well, you're just opening the door for them to what? Close it on you. Don't be searching till you have those questions and answers down. The other thing you're going to see in a few minutes is savvy brokers, lenders too, sometimes, but remember, they get paid no matter what. Landlords, huge risk. They're going to ask you questions, but they're going to frame them differently. And they're going to ask a question up front, and then a month down the road or 2 hours down the road, they're going to ask that question framed differently. And they know they're asking a similar question. This is part of negotiating. They're trying to determine well, are you telling the truth? Are you capable of answering articulately? So when you hear questions today or out on the field, pay attention because they're going to come up again. And I know that sounds obvious, but I see searchers all the time falling flat on their face because something they said wasn't consistent with what they said the last time. Questions for non-industry buyers with seller financing. Well, when buyers lack industry experience and specialized knowledge, especially if the sellers are going to finance part of the purchase, the sellers needs to be extremely cautious. I know everybody thinks that. Well, how come we then don't present ourselves all the time to what? Reduce their fear of us. So they're going to be asking questions, and they particularly want to know where the money is and where is it going to come from after the deal. You're going to see some questions on that one. These are the things that they're thinking. Now remember, now we're going into the minds of the sellers and the brokers, because if we don't know what concerns them, how can we be prepared to address it? And write it down. I'm not trying to be like these idiots and charlatans that are pitching for these no money down and all these fancy ways to steal somebody's business. That's not me. That's not me. What they're interested in is what's your motivation and vision and why? Well, they're trying to uncover your genuine interests versus your speculative venture. And this goes to these people who are searching agnostically. You got to be an idiot to do that too, by the way. And look, listen, if I'm offending anybody, this is my style. Get over it. I've spent 30 some years, 40 some years dealing with people who blow themselves up, or at least watching people blow themselves up. And I'm just done being politically correct. I'm trying to tell people what they really need to know. And so if you're a window shopper willing to look at anything, brokers and owners need to know that. So they're going to probe to try to find out, are you really interested in this niche? In other words, you're going to buy something in here, and if you come into this shop, will you buy it? They're going to be looking for your strategic thinking. If you can't show strategic thinking about the kind of business you want to buy, why would anybody want to talk to you? They're going to ask you, or at least they're worried about, do you fully understand what you're going to need to do and know to complete this kind of deal, like the one you're proposing? Because if you can't pitch that up front, no one's, well, I'll tell you who's interested. Owners who have got lousy businesses and they're looking for a greater fool to take their loser off their hands. Now, what about in the operational stuff? And this is where searchers think that they might not get questions, but they do. They want to know your understanding about the industry. How agile are you? Can you conceptualize solutions to problems? So a broker or an owner might say, well, here's something that's making us all crazy in our industry. What would you do about it? And if the first time you heard that that's something that concerns owners, oops, get it? They want you to articulate your plan specifically, none of this nonsense of, I have a team and they're going to help me. Who believes that? I don't believe it. And if you're an owner or a broker, don't believe it. If the potential buyer can't give you some plausible, oh, let's say, answer or response to that kind of concern, just dump them because there's another buyer around the corner. They're like buses. Another one will be buying tomorrow. They want to know, when I say they, I mean the lenders and the sellers and the brokers, they want to know that you've got some external support. Nobody likes one-man shows and do-it-yourselfers. And I know there's a large audience of do-it-yourselfers and one man show searchers. I call it the blind leading the disabled. Your talent is not other people searching, believe me. You need to be talking to professionals who know what in the hell they're doing, and you can pitch them to sellers and brokers. You could say, here's the industry expert that I'm relying on now, and if I buy your business, that person's going to be on call because there will be speed bumps. And yes, I'm transferring into something new to me or somewhat new to me. I want you to know I have the best talent out there. And so guess what? Sellers and brokers and lenders can Google that person and find out, is that person really a leader in this industry? Big one. I used that a couple of years ago with a client of mine in England, and that was a swing factor to get credibility because we went from not only one nation to another nation to buy, but we went from a service business to a manufacturing business. Having those outside resources that we could showcase up front made all the difference. Before I got hired, my client didn't do that, and he wasn't taken very seriously. He got taken very seriously when we set that up. And there were a few other things we did. Employee problems are big right now. So you need to be able to anticipate owners and sellers and lenders who are concerned about the labor pool. Is it available? The cost. So be ready to talk about it. Now, what about the capability of money? Well, the sellers want to know what's going to happen after the deal's done. And they're going to be asking you, what's your capacity to pay if the business can't? And don't say, well, that's why we have a personal guarantee. Kiss of death. You need to say, well, that's why I've held X amount of money aside. By the way, you don't say this up front. You don't have to say it up front unless you're forced to. I have money aside for contingencies. And I'm hoping that money I use for good news, like exploiting a new opportunity that pops up next month. But if something goes wrong, let's say I lose a major customer or a key employee, I have the money to go out and find a replacement. If you can't say that and show it, and if you don't show it with money, nobody believes you. What are some other concerns? Oh, yeah, learning and adaptability. They want to know what you've done to learn how to be a searcher and how to be a buyer. Oh, I read a book. I hope you read my books, by the way, but that's probably not enough. And this is where your advisory team comes in. Brandish the advisory team. You don't have to know everything. They have to know just about everything necessary to get you what? A done deal and help you succeed. So what? Show brokers and others that you have that. Don't say you have it. Show them. In other words, their name. If somebody Googles me anywhere in the world, Google me, what, thousands and thousands of results come up. I haven't found anything that says Leverette doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He's an idiot. It's all positive. So when sellers and brokers are looking at my clients. They Google me and some read my books. Brokers and owners read my books and they say, there's nothing in here to take advantage of a seller or a lender or a landlord. Nothing. It's all good news, how to get deals done. And of course, how not to fall into pitfalls. So you want team members who are visible. I'm seeing these searchers, by the way, they hire, this they're told, the billion-dollar lawyer who's done all these deals, but there's nothing available online when someone Googles them, or there's some sales pitches or accountants. You go to the accountant's website, and there's nothing in there that shows they have a long experience helping buyers and sellers of small and mid-sized business complete deals. Like they don't publish white papers or something. What I say to people is if you can't find a book written by somebody or a series of articles, skip them and go to somebody who has it. Otherwise, you're just what? Doing the same thing the sellers do. You're taking a check from somebody, but you don't know if you're going to get any value from it. Okay, this is for you brokers and sellers and lenders, etc. Don't mess around with these searchers. They're adults. Be direct and firm. Don't be afraid to directly hit on the buyers, otherwise known as the searchers, lack of experience and its implication. Hit them hard with it. Be sweet because these people are scared, searchers are scared of ever love and death. Okay, they are. So be nice to them, but probe and then get rid of them if they're not prepared. Don't ask vague questions. In a minute, you're going to see questions that cut under the skin of searchers. Watch the body language. That's why I like Zoom. Nowadays, people Zoom. Why? What's the point of driving across town or flying across the country if someone can't even pass a Zoom interview where they're scared to ever love and death, sweating, otherwise just not looking believable. So body language is big. You know that from Negotiating 101. And look for that enthusiasm. If you don't see enthusiasm, if you see the more like an accountant or lawyer personality, everything's just so serious, well, you're not going to have much fun in due diligence and deal making with those kind of searchers. You want a nice person. Likability. You ought to write that down. That's what I tell my clients. Likability is important, and it begins at the beginning. The idea here is for you searchers, this is what we use to build your acquisition criteria. So these questions are not necessarily to prepare for the sellers, brokers, lenders, landlords, etc. It's to prepare your acquisition criteria. Because if you can't convince yourself you can answer these questions, well, guess what? You would have to be an awfully nervy person to proceed. You'll change your criteria. Or you'll put more investment in what? Learning about the industry so you can bridge from where you are to where you want to go. See where we're going? We're drilling down. I highlighted in red the question I see too many searchers messing up. When the broker or owner or somebody, maybe their spouse, asks, so what are your experiences with similar businesses or industries? And by the way, can you give me some specific examples of that, of your involvement? The key word there is YOUR. Because what it does is it immediately shows transferable skills. And if you don't have it, now we need to think about going for another kind of business or pausing our search. Don't embarrass ourselves, pausing our search and doing our homework so that what we can say, okay, I have not operated this kind of a manufacturing company in a different country that I immigrated to, but here's what I know and how I'm going to handle it. And here's how my team, and here is my team going to help me do it. So can you see that? If there's any other questions there you think are important, well, you better highlighting them. Make a note to yourself. The stuff on the bottom, few searchers up front during their first and earliest interactions with brokers, etc., show verifiable evidence. That's the key. Verifiable evidence, not bullshit. That they can pull off what they say they can do. And guess what? It is location specific. So if I used an example earlier about Chicagoland, how particular kinds of businesses are operating in Chicago, it can be quite different than, let's say, New York City or Memphis. So you really impress brokers and sellers when you talk about the locality. Believe me on that one. Okay, so now they're looking, this is coming from the view of the people you searchers need to adequately impress to Well, get the best deals. I mean, remember, you can always find lousy deals, but if you want the best deals and maybe avoid some buyer competition, like all of it, this is what you do. So on this one, I thought the one in red is the best one about motivation and vision. So what's your long-term vision for the company? How do you see it evolving over the next 3 to 5 years? Platitudes don't work. So some remember, all four of these questions are the most typical ones. In each of the sections, these are the most typical questions. You might get asked all of them. If you do a really great job on one of them, you may not get asked the rest of them until down the road when it's getting more serious and brokers and banks and others are trying to figure out, are you worth continuing with? Make notes of any of these questions that you know you need to what? Work on. Now, how about about operational understanding, your management capabilities? Too many searchers think that we're all interested in their ability to buy. Well, we are a little bit, but mostly what owners are interested in is can you run the company? They'd like to preserve the legacy. They'd like the employees to continue to have jobs. They'd like to get paid if it's seller financing. So one of the questions I think is one of the more important of these four is can you describe the key operational challenges this type of business faces and how would you address them? If you don't know what those operational challenges are, well, then that means you don't know enough about the business. So either do your homework or change your criteria. Look at the other questions. Now, if this was a private Zoom with you, we'd be going through these in real time. But that won't work here. We have too many people here for too many different reasons. So I need to highlight the most important stuff. Financial capacity, seller financing. I like that question, number 5. What specific conditions or safeguards would you agree to, searcher, regarding the seller financing, such as a personal guarantee or collateral or maybe performance milestones? There are lots of ways that savvy sellers and their lawyers can structure purchase contracts so they're not out in the woods if things start to go wrong. They can get, I won't say necessarily in total control, but they can have so much control that you'll do what they tell you to do to preserve your investment in the business. Look at the other questions. Anything in there that you think is hugely important to get right to screen your self-searchers, write it down. By the way, everything you're seeing here are addressed in my books. That's a little commercial on the bottom. Not the questions. You won't see the question list, but what you will see is the information you need to know to understand all of this. Okay, how about your learning adaptability? Yeah, you got to be able to show you can learn, but you also have to show that you're nimble on your feet. You can adapt to changing circumstances because all of our businesses every morning are different than they were yesterday. I mean, look what the pandemic did. Look what the Great Recession did. Hey, look what the war over in the Mideast is doing. I mean, my God, every day there's some. Hey, how about our election? By election, I guess I mean all of you. Most of you are from countries that you, within the last year, had national elections, and that's changing what? The marketplace. So be ready for this. Are you willing to invest in training or mentorship or consulting to acquire the necessary industry knowledge and skills? Why? Because that stuff's changing weekly. If it's, oh, I'm a do-it-yourselfer, I'm pretty good at just doing my homework. Well, that may fly on some brokers and sellers, but if there's a smarter searcher there, if somebody who really knows how to communicate, you'll be dumped. Buyer competition will rule. Anything else on that? Be sure to write it down if you need to remember it. Okay, here's some more about understanding the business and looking forward. I like question number 4. How do you plan to handle the day-to-day operations and who will be responsible for key decisions? Here's what most searchers say. Well, I'm going to rely upon the owner during the transition of ownership to me, and he or she is going to help me learn the business. And of course, there are the key employees. End of story. Yawn. Bye-bye. You need to be able to address that. This is where that research comes in. I told you, you can get in 5 minutes enough information where you can then know how to address that particular question and go deeper if you need to. Industry knowledge and research. What research have you done on the industry and its trends? I ask that to my people who want to hire me, or they might want to hire me. One of the things I ask them is, so what have you done to further understand the industry, particularly if you're not already in it? And do you know what the trends are? If they say, yeah, I'm researching it right now, yawn, bye bye. What you need to say is, I've looked at these sources and you name them for industry research, and here are some of the key findings. And oh, by the way, Mr. Owner, are you nervous about this particular concern like lots of people are as I'm reading these research reports? Or Mr. Owner, or how are you handling what's trending in our industry or your industry? If you can't cite specific examples of your so-called research, then why would anybody pay attention to you? Okay, management operations. Who's going to be responsible for managing the business and what's their relevant experience? Again, well, I'm going to rely on the owner during the transition and the key employees. That's not good enough because guess what? Expect a key employee to quit. Better expect it. What are you going to do if they do that? Unless you want to be held hostage. You want to be extorted by a key employee who says, hey, without me, you're toast. And I've seen that with my own clients. Somehow, and most of the time we were able to kill that one before closing the deal. In other words, completing the transaction by offering some kind of incentive to the key employee to stay and perform. Keyword there, perform. It's not enough they stay. Retention's not enough. They have to perform to certain standards and they agree to it. Why? Because they're going to make money, get a share of the whatever it takes to keep that person there. But you need to be prepared for that happening. It happens all the time. And well, I'll just hire a headhunter or I'll go to an employment agency and ask for applicants who are looking for a job in this niche. That's just not good enough. You need to what? Be able to explain who's going to be responsible, what kind of experience are you going to be looking for? Because see, that'll show you're savvy to what it's like to be in what? The business. The money question. Number three question, how will you manage cash flow and what contingency plans do you have in place? Well, everybody on the others, everybody that's selling businesses or financing them or the landlords, they need to know that when you know what hits the fan after you buy, what are you going to do about it? There are ways to research this, by the way. One of the research question is, what are the things that typically go wrong in XYZ industry and how are new owners or buyers of those businesses coping with it? And if it's like, and if you think, oh, I'll just go to the bank and up my line of credit, think again. Because banks are, they love lending to you when they know your personal guarantee is going to cover the loan. But when you get into operating, they're not so keen to continue loaning to you if they smell anything about to go wrong. Risk management. I like the first question. How will you mitigate potential risks, such as market changes and unexpected expenses? Gee, that happened during the pandemic. Inflation. Now you may say, well, Ted, a lot of these questions seem similar. Well, they're really not. I mean, for astute people asking these questions, I hope you're getting that it's cutting into issues in different ways, the whole purpose of which is not for you to pass a quiz, it's for them to determine whether or not you know enough and are reliable enough to continue talking to, because searchers, you have lots of competition. I'm pausing in case there's something else there that you want to write down. We're almost done. Support and resources. There it is. What support systems or resources do you plan to put in place? Exit strategy. This also transition into the businesses. How are you going to measure success and what are your key performance indicators? We all hear about KPIs. I love the question when a broker or an owner or a bank, and I saw it about 2 months ago where a lender on a big deal, we're talking very large loan, middle market business. This deal was about to close, and the lender in the 11th hour said, "Oh, by the way, what's the KPIs you're going to use day one to know that you bought the right business the right way and you're going to track?" And we didn't have that well defined, and we almost had the lender back out. So my bright idea was, well, why don't we just ask them what they want? Let's just ask the lender. And they said, good try. So we did some research and we came up with some KPIs and we said, how does that look? And they go, okay, now you get what our concern is, because we want to be able to track you, but we need to know that you're going to set up the system for that kind of tracking and monitoring.
Hey, you. That's right, you. Have you been looking to buy an exciting and profitable business? Are you tired of searching, but only finding barriers that impede you from owning a wonderful business? Well, have we got some good news for you. You can find and buy the right business the right way. And you don't have to go it alone. For over 30 years, author and transaction advisor Ted Leverette, the original business buyer advocate, has been helping buyers worldwide achieve win-win done deals. Ted Leverette says, you can't buy it if you can't find it. You see, buying a business is all about search, because if you can't find it, you can't buy it. It's about being best and first. First on the scene with sellers, and being the seller's first choice, and top of mind for brokers and sellers. And most importantly, avoiding buyer competition. What about having to compete with other buyers? Well, you have to outbid them, which is a good way to pay more than a business is worth. Searchers do better with a winning business buyer marketing plan, and that's where Ted Leverette comes in. He'll help you prepare a winning plan, and then he'll guide your actions so you can find and then buy the right business the right way. But searching is not enough. The reality is too many people buy the wrong business, or they buy the right business, but on the wrong terms. That's why, if you want to buy the right business the right way, it makes sense to have Ted Leverette, the original business buyer advocate, on your advisory team. And one of the best ways to know what the savviest searchers and buyers do is to read Ted Leverette's books, How to Prepare Yourself and Find the Right Business to Buy, and How to Buy the Right Business the Right Way. You can get them at his website, partneroncall.com. Don't chance it. Right now, go to partneroncall.com, get the books, and schedule a free and private telephone conversation with Ted Leverette.